Hey everyone, Scott here to discuss The Accountant 2, starring Ben Affleck, John Bernthal, Cynthia Ade Robinson, Daniela Pineda, and J.K. Simmons, directed by Gavin O'Connor. Welcome back to Gavin O'Connor's collaboration with Ben Affleck when I reviewed this first movie as well as the way back 4 years ago. And it's been, and I did ask at one point if there was going to be a sequel to The Accountant based on that ending. And guess what? There was one, as a rumor has it. And and I'm here to discuss it with you guys. Now, I have seen this movie twice. And did I like it as much as the first movie? Let's get into it. We opened 8 years after the first movie with a bingo contest while Ray King, played by J.K. Simmons, happens to be there as he's a retired cop and becomes a private detective after the first accountant movie, as some mobsters keep an eye on him, with Anais, played by Daniela Pineda, comes to him to do a job for Ray, as he wants a child named Alberto has been separate to be unseparated from his family while still remaining in Juarez, Mexico. And Ray tries to get out of the building in the bathroom, and some mobsters come in, and Ray kills the bastards. But Maya's, or what's her name again? Oh yeah, Anais comes out of the bathroom and gets out, and Ray gets outside while getting shot to death with the secret message from Deputy Director Mary Beth Medina, returned by Cynthia Ade Robinson, that says find the accountant. And we get to Los Angeles, California, and we get to Medina hearing the news about Ray's death and sees the message. And this opening sequence is intense for damn sure, but it was a good opening sequence. In Boise, Idaho, autistic accountant Christian Wolf, returned by Ben Affleck, goes to the romance festival all dressed up where he can find a woman to love, and a bunch of women go to Christian and he makes it rather awkward for them. And that sounds familiar from personal experiences. I won't explain why. And I like how Ben Affleck portrays an autistic man, as he pulls it off tremendously, and his performance was very good, like in the first movie. While Medina goes to Ray's house and pays rent there, and he notices he had clues of evidence of his private investigating life. And she calls a place in New Hampshire to find Christian, and the stuff is good too, but not quite as good as the first movie, in my opinion. We move on to a mobster going to his boss Burke, who happens to collect fish or some kind of meat of some. And we move on to nighttime, and Anais shoots his goons dead and hires someone to kill her. And we get to Medina finding Christian in a crime scene, and she asks him for help looking for Ray's murderer, as well as looking for Alberto. As we move on to Fort Worth, Texas, and a man and his wife are killed as Christian pays. What was the point of that scene? As Christian pays attention to what assignment he has to do. And I like the way the movie is shot by director Gavin O'Connor, as he does a damn good job at making this movie, as well as the first movie and The Way Back, which I reviewed 4 years ago, in the Gavin O'Connor Ben Affleck collaboration, like I brought up earlier. But yeah, he does a good job with this film too. Christian gives Medina an idea on where to go to find a woman who worked at a meat factory named Burke, and says he doesn't remember this person. And Christian brings up mathematics to his accounting skills and beats the shit out of him, as well as his other goons, after Christian accuses him of money laundering, and gets information from Burke. And they get the fuck out of there and hire his hard ass brother Braxton, played by John Bernthal, as he practices what to say to someone named Margaret, which was hilarious, as this character was good and badass. And he calls Margaret, and I like these characters as much as the first movie, despite this isn't as good as the first movie, in my opinion. Braxton kills some bad motherfuckers and chats with a woman about fun facts about the movie The Wizard of Oz, like the dog Terry, for example, being paid more than say, paying the Munchkins $50 until Christian calls him twice and asks for his help with the case while playing with the lightsaber from Star Wars, which is funny because while this movie came out this past weekend, people were watching Star Wars Revenge of the Goddamn Sith this weekend because of its 20th anniversary. And the reason I'm calling it that is because if you've seen my review back in 2017 before The Last Jedi came out, you know why I call it that. That was an interesting scene dealing with the two classic movies which was The Wizard of Oz and Star Wars. Meanwhile, back in LA, Christian and Medina meet with Braxton at a motel as he learns Medina is a Fed and chats with Christian and learns some dialogue Medina tells him as Braxton is still pissed off at Christian after 8 years, and get a room where they'll meet some strippers as one of them calls out on her boss, Tomas, and the editing is actually pretty good POV, but the truth is this movie is about 5 minutes too long. But I still like the movie at this point. After the strippers call Tomas, saying Christian and Braxton won't let them leave, they take off and Tomas comes to the motel and Braxton beats the shit out of him and puts him in the trunk while Medina gets some information about Alberto's father's being dead, and they put Tomas in the trunk and get Medina home safely. And the next day, as Christian's contact looks for Ray's murderer, as his contact computer geeks are kids, believe it or not, while they find Ananias from a woman in the link in the picture named Pam Reed, who lives in Iowa, and spy on Pam on her computer. And this is computer hacking at its worst. And this is pulling off some clever moves like printing something, ringing the doorbell, and turning up the TV very loud. And that scene was clever, and the dialogue was sometimes pretty funny when said by John Bernthal, as he and Ben Affleck are a very good team with Medina until a few minutes later when she kicks them off the case as well as out of the house. Medina gets out of the case by case while she drives away with Tomas in the trunk, and Medina gets him out at the police station from the movie while back in Mexico, Alberto is still captured by Burke's men while there's a cat that will be brought up again at the end of the movie. And we move on to Medina getting Tomas in a meeting until Tomas is shot dead when he tries to testify with Medina. And that was an intense scene as well. Excuse me. Christian hears from his contact with Braxton about the information about Ananias from Christian's contact while they stay at Christian's camper home, he and Braxton. And they have dialogue about how if Braxton is happy, and at one point they talk about getting a pet of some kind. And Christian says to Braxton he's a cat person. As Braxton tries to look for Christian, but Christian didn't find Braxton over the years, while Braxton believes it's Christian's condition, which is autism. As Christian puts on sunscreen and Braxton afterhand throws it away, and we move on to a scene at a cowboy bar. And they get approached by Angie, who is asking Christian to pick a favorite song to pick for the band to play. And they play a country song with Christian dancing with Angie, and he's got the moves, and I like the dancing, and the dialogue is written pretty damn good in my opinion. After the dance, Christian and Angie hug it out until Gerald comes in and almost punches Gerald. But Braxton comes into the rescue, and they drive away, and after throwing the two motherfuckers out with Gerald out the window, which cracked me up, while Medina does some investigating on getting Alberto back to his family and discovers Jane Doe, who was attacked and has had surgery, and becomes something like a genius at chess and other stuff, for example, and suddenly becomes a skilled fighter after a while. And Braxton talks to someone over the phone about attacking someone, which made me a little suspicious that Braxton might be working with the enemy, but I'm enjoying myself thus far with this movie. Medina gets attacked by Ananias while Christian is on the way there on a motorcycle going 200 miles per hour and asks his contacts to find Alberto. And the fight between Medina and Ananias was not only violent, but kind of fucking brutal because Medina gets stabbed with a goddamn knife until Christian arrives at the scene and sees Anais, while Anais realizes she is actually Edith Rodriguez, who they were trying to look for most of the movie, with blonde hair. As she recognizes her husband and her son Alberto on a photograph, and Christian lets Anais go while he puts pressure on her knife stab. And Anais calls Burke as she doesn't kill Medina, as Burke sends someone to Juarez to kill Alberto, and Christian and Braxton go to Juarez because of his contact to save Alberto's life. And it leads to the final action sequence, in which I'll talk in the next sentence, as this movie works with autism quite well, in my opinion. In Juarez, Mexico, kids, including Alberto, go on a school bus to a field trip to their death, as they're going to get buried in the middle of the desert, and Christian and Braxton get to Juarez and get prepared for war and shoots at the bad guys, while Alberto hides from the bad guys, and the school bus drives the kids away from the war zone after Alberto was found by one of the bad guys. And Christian and Braxton get stuck in a building and get out of there and continuously shoot the bad guys. And at one point, Braxton gets shot, but luckily not dead. And Braxton finishes off the bad guys, while Christian gets a truck and runs over a bad guy. And I'm like, Jesus, this action sequence is fucking intense. Christian and Braxton drive to the school bus to get where the kids are getting buried at before they get buried, and shoot the last one of the bad guys, and releases the kids out of the hole and kills Burke's assistant. And they take the school bus on the way back to America, or wherever they are, and Braxton sees the cat that we saw earlier in the film and adopts it as his own, which explains why Christian said Braxton is a cat person. While Anais calls someone named Betu to finish Burke off and clear Medina's name, and Anais kills Burke as Medina and the other cops look around the meat shop where Burke owned, and he was accused of money laundering earlier in the film, as Medina is feeling better and Christian sends Alberto to the orphanage, where he's welcomed by the kids there, as Christian and Braxton bring him there while he holds the cat for an hour and a half or so, and Braxton complains about why he can't hold his own cat. And Christian makes a reservation to go hiking with Braxton, and Braxton accepts, and the climax was entertaining, but how entertained was I? Let's get to the rating. I'll give this movie a 7.7 out of 10. Not quite as good as the first movie, but I do like Ben Affleck's portrayal as an autistic man, in which he pulls off tremendously. And I like the way this movie was shot by director Gavin O'Connor, as he does a damn good job at making the two movies as telling the stories, as well as The Way Back, which is another film I reviewed of Gavin O'Connor, Ben Affleck collaboration back 4 years ago. And I do like these characters as much as the first movie, despite this isn't as good as the first movie, as this is 5 minutes too long. But don't get me wrong, I like this movie, and the dialogue can be sometimes pretty funny when they're said by John Bernthal, as he and Ben Affleck are a good team up with Medina until Medina leaves them an hour and 5 minutes into the movie. The movie is intense at times, but it has pretty damn good written dialogue, in my opinion, as the dance scene at the cowboy bar was nicely done, as Ben Affleck, he's got the moves, and I enjoyed myself with this movie, as this is a recommendation for this movie, as it works very well with autism, in my opinion, and at the end of the day, it's a pretty good movie, and I'll probably watch again on streaming or something. I'll probably won't own a physical copy of this movie, but I still enjoyed it, as it felt entertaining. So I'd like to thank you guys for joining me for this, and coming back for Gavin O'Connor and Ben Affleck collaboration. And until we ever get another one, have a good evening.